Back, and it's COMP305, week 11, lesson 11, part 2. We just finished mapping everything in Blender. Now we want to bring it across to Unity. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to go in Design. I'm going to bring up my Unity, and we're going to kick off a new project. I called it Spaceship Demo last time. Let's call it something else. We'll call it the Door Demo. Right? Door Demo. You can call it whatever you like. Okay, so I've got this. It's going to open up. And what I want to do is I want to drag my Blender in here. Now, I got to make a place for this to happen in Unity. So I'm going to right-click here in Assets and create a new folder that I'm going to call Models. I'm also going to create another folder called Textures. I'm going to create another folder called Materials. So I got models, texture, materials. One more. Let's go make another one called Prefabs. I'm ready to go. I got kind of our default folder structure. Well, prefabs, materials. I kind of get the model first. So the first thing I want to do is kind of, because I saved it on my desktop, I want to go to my desktop and find the model that I have, which is, it's probably going to be called Dock Door. There it is. There's Dock Door. Top blend. And if I was to pull this in, just like this, the Blender file, right into Unity, as you can see, if I drag and drop like this, it's going to bring it in. I've got my left door, and that's not the right one. That's the one I want to show you later. That's not fair. Let's undo that one. That's my treat to you guys, to show you this whole thing so it can work. Damn it. See what's happening. It's all your fault, Doug. So you're like, right. So that's one. Hold on, I got some other ones here. Let's see if, oh, here's one. So I got my door. That's my door. And I've got this one from this morning, or this afternoon, 2:30. So let's go into door. I meant this one. Sorry, I meant the wrong one. Okay, so this one is the one that I've got all the other ones. Now notice, even though it says door, all I care for is the door. But I actually have everything else here. I have my enemy. I have my ground. I have my plane. I have my player. A bunch of different things. Right, my plane is actually my door, so we rename that. And I can't do that unless I drag and drop it in, right? So once I drag and drop things like, if I want to just have my player in, if I drag and drop my player in, it brings everything in. Look, it didn't just bring my player in, it brought everything in. The geometry is kept. So if you notice, if I want to kind of move this around and whatever, I got all the geometry that I kind of laid out for my objects. It's all there. So nothing has changed in terms of my geometry. But there's no material, like you mentioned, right? Even though I was careful to include the materials and all that kind of stuff, materials are there, but there's no textures at all. Remember, I'm looking at and I kind of dragged it into the wrong place. I want to kind of grab all this stuff, bring it into models. And in my materials, I want to grab all these materials that I already have. They're just colors right now. I'm going to grab them and put them inside materials. There we go. So under my textures, I can get rid of my materials folder that came in with the Blender file. Okay, here we are. And what I want to do with the materials is I want to import my textures. Now, luckily, I kept them all, right? Here's all my textures that I kept. Sometimes we need to do all these things separate, right? Just because. If you have a problem importing, it's always nice to have your stuff. And I'm going to show you both ways. I'll show you this way, and I'll show you the FBX way. So this way. And let's just grab all these 4 textures and drag and drop them in. Boom. And once they've come in, they're going to come in. Now, I know I want to have these textures, when they come in, I want to have both the normal maps as well as the other stuff, that's the other information I have in here. So in order for me to make this work, I need to duplicate all this. So I'm going to kind of highlight all of this and press, from an edit perspective, you notice duplicate is Control or Command D. So I'll do that. And I'll duplicate the texture. Just do it all in one this time around, as opposed to what I did this morning. And notice I have duplicates now. So in the duplicates, I will change the naming convention so that the last part is an N. So make all that done. So kind of rename this one so that the last part is an N. So N. And I'm using the N convention to show that I'm going to map the normals. Map this as a normal, right? So this is my normal map that I'm going to make. I'm going to create the normal map from the original. And you can do that in Unity because it has that capability. Okay, there it is. So all of them are mapped. Or all of them are thing. I want to select all the normals, right? Just select those with Control or Command and left click. And notice on the left-hand side here, or the right-hand side, I have this as, they're all texture types. I don't want to make them texture types. I want to change them to normal maps. So they're all normal maps now. When I do that, and if I click Apply, all these multiple materials will be transformed into normal maps, and they will have different information. Here's all the normal maps. And look at the bumpiness. The bumpiness is all 0.25, right? That's not going to do for us, for my bumpiness perspective. I want to make sure that they align with what we did in Blender. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to go to Blender and look at some of these things, right? Because I have my Blender stuff right here. Now, it should have kept all this information, but it did not. So I'm going to go to my enemy, and I'm going to scroll down and see what my bumpiness is, and it looks like it's around 0.1 for my my wood. Right, so I'm going to go back to Unity, and I notice that my wood paneling is 0.1, so I'm going to change this right now to 0.1. So 0.1 is my bumpiness. So I change my normal map so it aligns with everything. Same thing with, I go to the next option, I click on my ground, and my normal is 0.05. Okay, so I'll go back to this and choose from my ground, which is soil cracked. Apply that. 0.05. Press enter and apply. And then go back to Blender again. So I've chosen that. I'm going to go hit my plane, which is actually my door. That's my door. And if I was to rename that, I should probably rename that door. My door, my bumpiness 0.12, something like that. If I was going to be really accurate, I could do that. So that's what the futuristic door is. So right here, so 0.12, 0.12. And you might choose just 0.1, but that's okay. Apply. So less bumpiness, if you notice. It's already pre-done for you, right? And then if I go here, my last one is my, so I got my ground, 0.05, my enemy, my player. My player is 0.139. Okay, so I'm just going to try to choose the same values. So player, which would be the concrete, and 0.139. You can be as specific as you like, right? Just like we did in play apply. So once I've done that, now it applies a different bumpiness to it. That's what it does, right? And there's different filtering. You can choose sharp and all kinds of other stuff. I'm not going to monkey with those these things too much. But what I'd like to do is I want to start looking at some of these assets. So let's look at my enemy. Notice my enemy, even though he's red, right? He has a couple of things. I have the material I'm using is a standard material for my my wood planks old. So let me go back into materials, and I can select all the materials here. And I know that every one of my materials, instead of making them standard, I want to make them so that they're standard specular. So that's the first thing I like to try and do. So change them all to standard specular, which changes these options. Rendering mode, there's opaque, there's cutout, there's fade, there's transparent. I like opaque because opaque means you can see them, right? And I'm not going to change some of these objects here. Right? Okay, cool. So now that I have those, let us add in, if I go back to enemy, my enemy now, if I look at my, it's a standard specular setup, and my enemy uses different kinds of textures. My enemy uses the wood. So I'm going to use the wood for the albedo and the wood normal for the normal map to give me that look and feel that I want for my enemy. But it's a little red, because remember, I added red color, and it's coming through. So I can certainly make the diffuse color, right, the diffuse that I want to make this other color seem transparent if I like to. But let's just turn it down. So we're just going to make it, we're going to make it a little bit redder. We're going to turn this right down to this color over here. Okay, so there it is. And we'll do the same thing for the block. So click the block, and as I look at the actual the player is going to be this concrete bunker. So I'm going to use the concrete bunker material. So I'm going to use the normal map. this one, and I'll use the concrete material for this one, and it changes it, and of course the color is wrong, so I'll just pull that across, right across to this side over here, approximately. It's a little green, but not as bad, and you know, the normal map is there for it. Okay, cool. And if I don't like the specularity, if it's too bright, I can turn that down a little bit. And the same thing with this enemy. I can turn the specularity down a little bit more, so it's not as bad, right? And I do the same thing with the ground. So the ground, again, I can look at the soil cracked. I can pull in the albedo for it. There it is. And I can pull in the normal map. So I'm just rebuilding it. Now, that's not bad, but I want to kind of reduce some of that shine to it because I don't want it's that shiny. And it's a little bit red for my liking, so I'm going to pull this across so it's less red and more gray. A little bit red, but not so much. There you go. Okay, and the last one, of course, is my door. We've called this plain, but let's just rename this so that it's the door. Door. Okay, there's my door. And this is the one that's the funniest one, right? Because if I looked at the futuristic door, I have two. I have one that says futuristic door, so I'll move that to the albedo, and I'll take the bump map into my normal map here. There it is. And I want to reduce that a lot. So I'm going to put that down. You know. So kind of a more realistic look to it. Okay, cool. So I've got my objects, and they're all cool and all. If I want to map my door so it's the edge of my plane, first of all, my plane itself and everything else, all these objects here are individual objects. And what I want to do is make them prefabs. So click on the prefabs and take my enemy, drop it in here, take my ground, drop it in there, and my door, and my player. There we go. So I've got all those things. So I'm going to kill my door, kill this whole thing, delete it all, and now I can add them back in. So I can add my ground separately. And let's add a couple things for my ground. One of the things I need for my ground is some kind of collider and rigid body. So I'm going to add a material, and I need physics. I tried this earlier, it didn't work. I don't care about a rigid body first, it's not going to move, but I do need a collider. And there's different options I can use. I'm going to use a mesh collider for this one. I'm not going to use convex because it'll cause it to be like this. So just a regular mesh collider. Now the good thing is if I use a mesh collider for my plane, as an example, it's pretty good. It wraps it pretty nicely. Okay, so that's the first thing I need, and I'm going to apply that back to the prefab. Now that I have that, I'm going to duplicate my ground a bunch of times to create my landscape. Right. So let's try that out. So I'm going to go Command D, right, which duplicates my ground, and I'm going to press the V key, right, which is vertex snap mode, and I can snap my ground in place. Right, so again, and for those people who never saw that or who can't remember to do that, that's the way I do it. So I can do the same thing. To make it quick, I can kind of select both pieces, this piece and this piece of my ground. So those two pieces are both selected. I'll press Control or Command D to duplicate them, and then I'll press Vertex Select Mode or V Select Mode on the bottom to pull them across. There we go. And the same thing. There's my ground. So I got a kind of a bigger plane area, and it's all looking pretty cracked up. Again, this could be a place where you're running. It could be the base, the bottom part of your maze. Many things you can use here. But let's put the door on one of the edges of the ground, because this is going to be, again, we're going to talk about we're incorporating how to add things from Blender. But let's put this door over here in the corner. So we're going to kind of drag the door in. There it is. And I'm going to kind of select this one and click Vertex Mode. And I'm going to kind of make it so that I rotate it across the y-axis. So I'm going to rotate across the y-axis. So here's the y-axis, and let's make it -90, right? Make sure that that's saying loading dock, good. And take the vertex snap mode and move it here to the corner. So there's my corner. So my door's vertex snap is what it's, so it's going to snap the vertex to each other, so they're completely in line there. And if I scroll in, you can see that they're right kind of mapped together, right? That's pretty good. Okay, so I've got that going on, and I want to add a collider to my door, right? But when you touch my door, you're going to go to the next level, right? So what kind of collider do I add in there if I want to touch my door and go to the next level?
Box.
No, trigger. Well, you can add a block. It can be a box or whatever, but it's a trigger collider. So it's yes, not no, and it's I was wrong. And it's so I go to physics. I don't need a rigid body, but I need some kind of box collider, or I can make it a mesh collider because it's just a plane again. So if I make it a mesh collider, there it is. But the collider is a trigger. But notice how I can't do that unless I make it so that it is a convex mesh, right? So let's get rid of that because I don't want to use that remove component. Let's make it a box. Sorry, I always ran into this. Physics and box collider. Sorry, that's what I wanted. And now my box collider is exactly perfect, but I want it to be a trigger. So it's not going to collide. It's not going to actually move, and there's no rigid body. So it's not going to fall anywhere. Cool. All right. Now here are the more complex ones. That's the easy one. Let's apply this one back. So that applies back to the prefab, right? Now the ones that are more complex. The ground. Is easy, but we have to apply the objects or the colliders for the other ones. So I'm going to put in the enemy. There it is. And I also want to put the player. So let's put that in there too. So we'll kind of put the player in there too. And I'll kind of put him in there. Let's add a collider for the enemy. So again, there's two things I need for the enemy and the player. If they're going to interact, I need them to have a rigid body. So let's add rigid body to both these components by clicking both of them. So both of them, I'm going to add components. I can multiply add components to both of them. I'm going to go physics, and I'll say rigid bodies. I'm going to add both rigid bodies to both these ones. They both have it, right? And now there's different colliders I can add. So I can't click both of them. So for the enemy, I definitely could add in a sphere collider. Right? So I'm going to go add component, physics, sphere collider, right? There we go. So the sphere collider is added into that. And for my box, which is my player, I'm going to go I go add component, physics, box collider. Right? So there's got box collider and sphere collider. They've got gravity. Let's check it out to see if they work. First of all, where's our camera? Is my camera even going to see everything? Well, yeah, it's there. And there's what my camera can see, so I can move that around. Right, let's move it a little bit closer so I can see these things interacting. And let's press play. So let's see if it works. And we're good, right? So it kind of looks okay. This is what the real scene is going to look like, right? Where the box looks pretty good. It looks like my ground is looking pretty good. Let's lift them up a little higher. So let's just shift around the camera so I can see what the camera sees. This is what it looks like. And they fall pretty quick. Let's shift. First of all, let's apply our collider for both the player and for the enemy. But let's duplicate our enemy. So we'll go Shift D, or sorry, Command D for duplicate, Command and Control D. And I'll put this over here. So I'll add some more. So duplicate that one too. Right? And there we go. Okay, so these things are falling now, and we only need one player. We're gonna make him fall from a very tall height. And let's see what happens. So bam. And they have like rotation. Like look, they actually rotate. They have a little bit of stuff. Now here's the thing with the my spheres. Notice how they're perfectly round, and they don't have any bumpiness to them at all, and they also don't have any kind of bounce. So how do I add that quality to them, right? So stop that. If I want to add, kind of a quality to the bounce, like I need to add a physic material, like I talked about before. So how do I add that in? First, I'm going to go to materials, and then I'm going to go to right-click here, create material, but it's going to be a type of physic material. And we're going to call this thing, kind of a world physic material. You can go new physic material. Let's make it for the spheres. Okay, so it's going to be spheroid. Spheroid. And notice how my dynamic friction is 0.6. We'll drop that right down to 0.3. And we'll do the same thing for static friction, so really low. And our bounciness, though, we'll make it like 0.5. So it's like pretty bouncy. Okay, cool. Now that I've done that, I won't say the scene. Now that I've done that, I want to apply my spheroid physic material to my sphere. So I'm going to choose my enemy. There it is. And what I can do is notice how in the sphere collider, there isn't a material, but it has the ability for me to add a physic material. So I'm just going to take this and drag and drop that in. Now I'm going to apply that back so that all my spheres have that. So all my enemies have now this, this physic material. Now, if it doesn't have it in, this is the problem with them. That's the door, sorry. Enemy, spheroid. Enemy, spheroid. Cool. My box does not have that though, okay? I don't have my spheroid material. Let's see how bouncy my balls can get now. So, boom, right? They're a little bit bouncier, the spheres. And this fell too, right? So it kind of caused it. Still not quite what I wanted. And you know what? I think for my enemies, they got to have a heavier mass. I'm going to make them a mass of 3 and see what that does and press play. And then see what that happens, because I think they still fall pretty darn slow, right? So let's just, and there's some drag and so on, and use gravity. Let's make it so it's like, I don't know, 30. See how fast they fall now. That's what I really want. I want to really kind of make it so that they, yeah, well, I'm using gravity, but my mass is 30, right? So I could make it so that the gravity for the whole world is increased, but that means everything is going to be increased. And the way to do that, of course, is to go to, the other thing is I'm making it just for this one, but not for the others. So let's like add them all in. So they're all the same. Let's try this first. So apply them back. They kind of float, right? They kind of float. So if I want to make the gravity more for the game, instead of 9.8, I can go to Edit. I can go to Project Settings, right? And now you notice there is Physics. Under Physics, I can affect, right now, the gravity is minus 9.8. For most video games, I'm going to make the gravity like 30, right? But remember, when you do that, everything is heavier, right? So if I go like minus 30, just to show you what that looks like, and if I go play now, right now, everything's going to fall faster, right? Which makes sense. So it's more playable than if it was slower, right? So let me show you that again. So bam, bam. And see how there's a bit of a bounce there, but these things spin out of control. Now, if you put them on top of each other, this is where you can really see the thing, how it works. So if I go kind of move this one here and move this over here and see if I can choose this one to be just a little bit above the other one. Same thing with this one. See if they're a little closer, and let's try that. There we go. See how that works? So you see that whole physics simulation and everything else works nicely. And you have, it's a pretty good look for it. So we created our objects in Blender, brought them in, and now you have some objects that are workable, right, across in Unity. And they're objects we created. Now you can make everything from walls. I made them cubes. But you can make actual walls with thickness, with a cutout and everything else. And to create your, kind of your the look and feel that you want, you can also make them to scale, right? Because remember, we've already made it so that Blender can work with meters. So if I really want to here, I can make it so that this door, which is just a door, right now I can see how big how tall and wide this thing is. This is about, from a Z perspective, because remember Z up for Blender, is about 1.8 meters high. And if I think that's not high enough, I want to make the door like 3 meters high by whatever, I can continue to scale this thing up until it's the right size. So I can do one of these, scale, and let's try that again. I meant this is the height, right? X and Y coordinates wise. They're actually already 3 meters, 3 by 3. So it's there's a pretty big door, right? And if I was to bring in a character controller, right, into my game, then it would kind of scale pretty nicely, right, for this door. It just looks pretty small right now because just the distance that we are away from it. Okay, what if we brought this in as an FBX before we stop? So we're going to go back to models, and I've got my door. I can kill my door models now because I don't need them. I've created them as prefabs. They're gone. And let's make sure I'm right about that. So it would be terrible if I just did all that work for nothing. And yeah, that was really bad. Because, yeah. So let's see if I can undo that change. And I probably cannot. Yeah. Anyways, but the idea is that I'm going to bring them in as FBXs anyway. So let's try that out. So I'm going to kind of get these pieces here and delete them. Now I still have the materials, right? So I want to show you this. Materials wise, I still have them, and I still have the texture. So those didn't go away. But now I'm going to bring them in, these new models in as an FBX, right? So let's go back to Blender. So here we are in Blender, and I'm going to go File, Save, and I'll say File, Export. Now this is the challenge. I was going to export it. I have to export it as FBX. That is the standard way we export everything, right? And let's make sure that everything is selected. So I'm going to say Select All, right? File, Export, FBX. And in here, if you notice, from a settings perspective, I want to select it, all the selected objects I want to export. This is Blender settings now for exporting. The other option is, notice how everything here, lamps, meshes, the whole thing, empties, they're all exported. I don't want lamps and meshes and armatures and all that stuff, just meshes, all right? And if you notice, if you hover over other, it tells you other stuff like curves, meatballs, and all kinds of other stuff. This is just meshes, right, that I want to export. Now, unfortunately, it will not export things like materials. Notice there's no place for that, right? But all I want is the meshes. So if I export FBX, and I'm going to export it to my desktop again. So here's my desktop. And I'm going to call this, instead of door FBX, we're going to call it, that's pretty good actually. I don't think I've called it a door FBX before, so let's try that. There it is. And let's just minimize this thing. And I'll pull this aside. And somewhere in here, we'll have a door FBX. There it is. And I'll pull that in. So now this is the difference between the blend file and the FBX file. So I'll take my FBX file and pull it in. And then, bam, I have everything we had before, right? All these things. Here's my door and my enemy. Take a look how they're all fully meshed though, right? And now I have all these. These are all dead. These prefabs don't work anymore. Notice how the prefabs are all gone. Because I had killed them all when I deleted my models, right? Because I need my models for the prefabs to work, right? So get rid of all those just to show you the difference. And all the same kind of things are true. So if I go back to models, I have my door model. And if I drag one in, I drag them all in. But now the beautiful thing is all that work we did earlier is preserved, right? So we don't have to worry about things like our smoothness and all that stuff we kept, because we already did all that texturing work. It wouldn't have come in with textures, but it knows where to put them because it understands the material. Materials saved us because even though we imported the meshes, it knows where to put them all. So now that we have all these, again, I can add different things. For example, I can go with my my ground. I can add in the same default physics material. Like an example would be, I only care about the kind of a mesh collider for the ground. There it is. And for my player, I'm going to have in, instead of a, I'll make it so it's a physics material, rigid body. Let's add that in. And I also want to add in from a physics material, let's do the other way around, box collider. And for my enemy, I want to have a rigid body, physics, rigid body. And we'll make it a little heavier than normal, so like we'll make it 30, crazy heavy. Plus, we'll make it so that we'll also add in a sphere collider there. And we'll apply that. Now, this hasn't been applied back to the prefab because there is no prefab. And for the door, same thing. I'll add in a physics material, which is just a box collider. There's for the door, but it's only a trigger. So when you walk through it, it'll trigger. And now that I've got all those done, now I can go to prefabs and pull them in. So I'll say my door, here's my door prefab, here's my enemy prefab, here's my ground prefab. Same speed as last time, player prefab, right? So all those things, and now I can delete that whole thing because who cares about those? And I can pull them in. So here's my ground prefab, right? And if I want to pull my door in, I can put it in a specific location, right? So there it is. There's loading dock, and I press V for vertex mode, vertex snap mode, put that over there. And I put my enemies in place. There's my enemy and my player. And I still have my stuff changed. So here's my enemy. Let's move this up here. And we'll duplicate it, maybe over here, and another one. Put it way higher over here. So it'll be 3 of those, and we'll press play. And hopefully we'll be able to see the same kind of thing that we did last time, right? So not bad. You see how the player looked like it was really weak? Because the enemies are like 30 times with the player, so it'll crush the player, right? But the idea here is that it didn't take long for us to import. FBX is really the way to go. That's the truth, guys. That's what we should be doing. We should really import FBX. But again, in Blender, it doesn't support saving the materials. In Maya and in 3D Studio Max, it does. Just as a treat, before you go, I can also import one more kind of model. So here's my door models. Now be careful not to kill those, but I can also import the other one. So let me go back to my Blender model, and I have something called the dock door that I've separated. So if I kind of rock in there like that, notice how inside there I have the door frame, right, which I can pull in, and the dock door has this object, right? So let's let's move this up a little bit. So if I select this, here's my object. Now this dock door is massive. But I did it on purpose so I can rescale it a little bit differently. Notice how I don't see anything on this side. I do see things on this side, and it's flipped around, right? Loading dock is kind of reversed. So how do I fix that from a blend perspective? Well, I could flip the rotation, yeah. So I could rotate it so that it's like, you know, right now my position is 4.67. If I say my rotation here along the y-axis is minus 180, well, there it is, right? But I can't see anything. And if I go on the other side, there it is, but it's still undo. But what I need to do is, so if I undo that one, what I need to do is scale it. If I scale it at -1 along the x-axis, or the y-axis, it flips it that way, so that's not right. So I can't do that. What about the x-axis? If I go -1, that looks pretty good, right? So I can do that. So I can kind of flash it that way. It's just the way I made it in Blender. Now, this is the whole loading door, right? Now, if I look down at this thing for a second, if I zoom in, notice that there are different pieces. There's the frame, as well as the left door and the right door. Let's save these objects as separate prefabs. So if I go back to prefabs and I go door frame, left door, right door, and now what I can do is I can click this one option and I can kind of slide it away. I can make it so that each of these doors, each of these pieces are separate, right? So what I can quickly make an animation by recording it so that, for example, if I want my animation, when I click on a particular platform, instead of the door rotating or like opening this way, sliding in, it'll push into the door. We can try this next time. It can slide in like this, and then what it'll do is it'll slide away, right, to the door, as opposed to, right, the way it's done right now. So that's the kind of stuff that we can do if we separate it out. It looks realistic. It's a massive door. That's the way I made it. But you can certainly put this together so it looks pretty good. It's a little rocky for me. I probably could have made this a little bit less, rocky. But notice that the material took to this one as well because the materials that they use are the same. If I go back to prefabs and if I look at my door frame and if I see what type of material it's using, it's got my normal and specular maps all built in because when it comes to the types of materials it's using, it's the same. See, futuristic material. So there's not extra materials that are involved here. Now that I've got one, I've got the other one. All right, questions around this. So remember, what you're going to be tested on, is not around Blender, but around things we're going to be talking about in terms of materials, some stuff around 3D, textures, those kind of things that we just talked about just now. How to import things and what's the format that we use to import. What's the best format? Well, in Blender, there's two formats. There's the blend format and there's the FBX format. But the preferred format across all files, all types of systems for Blender is FBX. It's not blend because FBX is a standard format that we use, right? So that we bring things in from Maya or from Blender or even from 3D Studio Max. Okay. So that's the standard format. So you should know that. You should know that FBX is the standard format for that, and how to bring them in, how to separate them into their prefabs, all those kind of things you should know. We're not going to be doing any kind of practical for this one. It's just multiple choice, true, false, just to test your knowledge a little bit, and to separate some of those marks out from any kind of final exam or test or anything like that we normally have. All right. Questions around this stuff? After the test that we're going to have tomorrow in this class, right? I'm also going to do a little teaching session on how to do an interior scene because we have bundled with our last package, our FPS demo for section 1. We have tons of dungeons and stuff like that, dungeon assets we're going to put together, and let's see if we can make in the last hour a dungeon. It'll be a bit of a challenge for you guys, right, to make a bit of a dungeon. I'll give you some criteria, and let's see if you guys can put it together for next time, okay? All right, that's it for me, and we'll see you tomorrow.